It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
And welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast as we talk your real estate property news 7 days a week, every morning just after 6 a.m. and available all day, every day thereafter, as heard on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Amazon. Yeah, another weekend rolled around pretty fast. Saturday, August the 10th today. Another weekend of real estate around Australia. And we have talked many times about living in a tiny home, cutting back on a mortgage. But it's not as easy as just saying, I want to go tiny. There are many, many factors that you have to take into consideration. Imagining staying in a remote cabin in Norway and then becoming inspired to create your very own tiny home in Australia, despite never having held a power tool. And you say to yourself, I'm going to build this. Well, our next guest was renting a studio in New South Wales, feeling the pain, as so many people are right now, of the rental market. She liked the idea of small, so she extensively researched tiny houses, stayed in several, and sketched her own plans. During COVID-19 lockdowns, she built her tiny home on a purpose-built trailer. So let's find out a little bit more about this and catch up with Louise Southerden. Welcome, Louise, to the Real Estate Breakfast. It certainly sounds like you have been on a bit of a journey.
Oh, thanks for having me, Craig. And yes, it has been an incredible journey. I guess it was probably about 2 years of building and designing, and then I've spent the last 2 years writing a book about it. The way you describe it is perfect, and it really did happen kind of very organically like that. I think I'd been a travel writer for 25 odd years before COVID, and so I was very used to staying in small places, and I do a lot of camping, and the idea of being in a tent with, a small space that's cozy, but you've got the big wide world outside really appealed to me. And then that cabin in Norway was just amazing because it was a very rustic experience, chop wood, carry water experience, no electricity, no mobile coverage or internet or anything, no running water. And obviously I need all those things to live a modern life, but there was something about living that simply that just got me. And I just thought, I really want to live like this, and how can I do it? And, then I started looking into ways of having, it's actually quite difficult to live in a small space in a country like Australia. Like the whole system is kind of geared towards bigger houses. And so that's what kind of led me into tiny houses on wheels.
I just want to take you back, though, just for a moment, back to Norway, because it's almost like it's the scene setter, if you will. And you've written this book, and I should point out we've got a two-parter with you, so we're going to talk about the book in the second chapter of our discussion. But, like writers like to find little spaces where the creativity goes off in their brain. It sounds very much like Norway was the spot where the illumination happened. Is that fair to say?
That's really true. Yeah, it was, I've stayed in a lot of different kinds of small dwellings through my travelling life, tree houses and ship's cabins and compartments on long distance trains. And there was something about this cabin, I think also because I was there alone in a forest, a couple of hours walk from the nearest train station. I was just surrounded by forest, and there was a lake nearby where I had to get my water, but it was summer, so I could swim in the lake as well. And I think just having, long summer days, the sun didn't set till about 11 o'clock at night, and just having all that time alone, I wrote a lot just in a notebook that I had, spent time even just collecting berries. And it sounds very, famous five, where you're in nature, but you're sheltered as well by this really solid cabin. And one night this big storm came through and lashing rain and thunder and lightning, and this this cabin, which had been built in the 1940s by loggers in that area, was just so solid. And I just loved that feeling of being in a natural environment, but feeling really safe and cozy at the same time. And I think maybe it's a biological thing. I kind of feel as well that human beings have been living this way for most of our existence. You know, it's only very recently that this kind of big house movement has come along and we've started to think that's normal. But I think we are kind of hardwired to live in small spaces and be tuned into our natural surroundings.
The other aspect to all of this is that you say that you have never picked up a power tool before and that you're going to build this. Most people listening will say, well, that's really interesting, isn't it? That's a bit of a challenge. As much as anything else, it seems to me that once you had formulated the idea and it was stuck in your brain, that this was a challenge. This was a little bit of an Everest for you to climb. So talk to that in terms of how you decided you were going to build it. I know that somebody helped you with that, but you've still got to have the drive and the determination.
Yeah, it definitely was. I did see it as an adventure because, I mean, some people would say it was foolhardy, but I did make sure I had support to do this. And I guess also just I had, to remember that the idea did gestate over a few years. And I did do a tiny house building workshop with Fred's Tiny Houses, and the whole tiny house thing as well started off as a DIY movement. So in lots of ways, in all my reading about tiny houses, it was always DIY to start with, and it's only been fairly recently in the last few years that there are now tiny home builders, and there's a lot more luxury options, and the cost of them is blowing out a little bit. But when I was first looking at it, people would be building tiny houses for $10,000 or $20,000 and using recycled materials. And when I first heard about tiny houses, I thought, oh, okay, you can build one, and you don't actually have to be a builder. And because they're small, it seems more doable, I guess. But I did spend a lot of time planning things and looking up YouTube videos, and I did a woodworking workshop as well before we started the build. So I was doing it with my partner at the time, Max, and he had a lot of woodworking skills. And how it all happened during COVID was that I had no work and it was kind of a window of opportunity to do this. And he suggested that we build it on his land and we could use his tools. And he had a couple of tradie mates who could help with the electrics and plumbing. So it started to seem possible. And obviously it was a near vertical learning curve for me personally, but I kind of wanted that. I thought this is a chance to kind of do something really difficult and challenging and see what I'm made of in a way. I think we all, I don't know, do we all get this? But I definitely had this sense that I had wanted to do an adventure of some kind. I just didn't expect it to be on home soil, building a home. I thought it might be a long walk in the Himalayas or something like that. But yeah, it definitely was very challenging on so many levels, and it definitely fit the definition of adventure, as it turned out, in ways that I really didn't expect.
Just want to circle back to one of the points that you made, and that was at the start of the tiny industry, as you say, they were using recycled materials and the cost factor incredibly cheap, far cheaper than what it is right now. It's kind of exploded on the price point. You've done this off your own bat, but not everybody can really do that. So are you surprised by just the amount of growth in terms of how expensive these have become? And in some ways, it's almost out of reach for some people.
Yeah, I am surprised. I guess I'm a little bit of a purist. I guess that what attracted me to tiny house living was the simplicity and minimalism and not doing without things, but just bringing your expectations back in line with how we could be living, to not use too many resources, to reduce your energy use. So I don't have an air conditioner. I don't have a dishwasher by choice. And, that's how the market works, I guess. Once commercial interests get involved and people realize they can have, 2 lofts and they can stand up and their tiny house can be 10 or 11 meters long and even wider than a road vehicle, because there are caravan specs for tiny house builds. So you try to keep them within road limits. So it's usually 2.5 metres wide and they have to be usually 4.5 tonnes or less in weight. I'm kind of surprised that it's exploded in price point, and it is getting unreachable for some people because, the idea of a tiny house to me is making housing affordable for everyone, and not just for people on low incomes, but it's very liberating, I guess, when your housing costs come down because, you can rethink everything. You can rethink the job you're doing. You have more time to do things that you love or to spend time in your community. Or, I'm involved in a few community organisations now that I never had time for before, not just because I was travelling, but because I was busy making a living to pay rent. And now I can, I'm in land care and I'm in the community garden, and you can do those things that help makes communities more integrated. And, a lot of the problems we see in the modern world have come from this, disconnection that we have, loneliness and anxiety, and because people are so pressed with, just often trying to afford housing, which is at the root of it, I think, a lot of the times that, they don't have time to be involved in their communities or to even be with their kids. So it's quite an interesting trajectory that this tiny house movement has had. And of course, in the US, it's been going for a bit longer. I think it's been going for about 20 years. I don't know if it's similar there, but I think in Australia, this luxury tiny house thing has definitely taken off. And then, of course, a lot of them have been built for Airbnb rentals, which is another issue, I suppose. I built mine for $80,000. That was my partner and I working full-time for 8 months. But that was also before the building materials went up in price. So that was during COVID. And then we just got in, I think, before the shortages of building materials and before the prices went up. So we're really lucky. But I guess that's our time as well. So if we were being paid, then the cost would be greater. But I just think it's an incredible thing to be able to design and build your own home.
All right then, Louise. Well, thank you for coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast this morning. As I mentioned, this is the first half. We'll do another piece with you in a couple of weeks' time because there's quite a bit to sort of break down. But enjoy your Saturday, enjoy your weekend, and thanks for coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Craig, letting me rave about tiny houses for a bit.
Unlock the secrets of real estate and stay informed about the latest real estate buzz with hot market trends, emerging suburbs, and hidden gems. Each week, we bring you in-depth real estate discussions, including inspiring stories from homeowners, knowledgeable real estate professionals, and economists. Whether you're a buyer, seller, or just a real estate enthusiast, we are your ultimate property podcast.
And it did work out well because for the price that we put down, we were able to get a house that we were really happy with the land size. Because if we found something like Sydney, it would have been at least 3 times the price.
Let's break that down. So whereabouts did you move to and what did you end up doing?
We moved to Hazelbrook, which is the mid-Blue Mountains. Initially, we had looked around lower Blue Mountains, which is closer to Sydney. But again, the property prices were really high and also the demand was quite low. We found that, we started our hunt back in early this year and every single Saturday we'd be going up there. Sometimes there was only one property on the market and we'd spend about 90 minutes driving each way for a property that was either not up to our standards or incredibly out of our budget.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.